Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizons and watched the massive alien station grow larger on the main screen. 3 years of travel through the dark spaces between stars had brought humanity to this moment. The Galactic Harmony Council had finally agreed to meet with Earth after 300 years of cold silence since first contact. Ambassador Lisa Carter walked up beside him and placed her hand on the metal rail. Her face showed no emotion, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. Behind them, Dr. Alex Rodriguez checked his instruments one more time, while Colonel Ryan Parker reviewed tactical data that meant nothing here in neutral space. Communications. Specialist Maya Johnson sat at her station translating the endless stream of alien chatter that filled the space around the station. The station was unlike anything humans had ever built. It stretched across space like a small city made of crystal and light. Ships the size of Earth's largest buildings moved around it like insects around a flower. Some vessels seemed to be made of pure energy, while others looked like they had been grown rather than built. The technology on display made humanity's greatest achievements look like stone tools. Lisa had spent months preparing for this meeting. Earth's best minds had worked together to create the perfect presentation of human culture and achievements. Art galleries worth of paintings and sculptures had been digitized. Every piece of music from Bach to the latest pop songs had been cataloged. The complete works of Shakespeare sat next to modern novels and ancient poetry. Scientific discoveries and mathematical proofs filled databanks. Alongside philosophical treatises and historical records. The docking process took 2 hours as alien. Traffic controllers guided the New Horizons through layers of security fields and scanning beams. Jake had commanded ships for 15 years, but he felt like a child learning to walk as automated. Systems took control of his vessel. The aliens didn't trust human piloting skills enough to let them dock manually. When the airlocks finally connected, Jake felt his stomach tighten. Maya's translation systems had been working overtime to decode the basic breeding protocols. Even saying hello to these beings required following hundreds of rules about tone frequency and gesture timing. One mistake could be seen as an insult. That would end negotiations before they began. The delegation walked through corridors that seemed to bend space itself. Gravity pointed in different directions on different sections of the walkway. The walls showed scenes from dozens of worlds under skies of every color imaginable. Alex kept taking readings with his instruments, but the numbers made no sense. The station used physics that human science barely understood. They passed other species heading to their own meetings. Tall beings made of living crystal walked alongside creatures that looked like organized clouds of gas. Something that might have been a walking tree nodded politely as it passed. Each species seemed perfectly adapted to the strange environment of the station. The council chamber was a vast sphere with no clear up or down. Delegates from 47 different species floated in assigned positions around the curved walls. Some sat in chairs, while others hung from the ceiling or stood on platforms that defied gravity. The diversity was overwhelming, but Jake noticed something odd. None of them seemed to be talking to each other. They all stared straight ahead with expressions that showed no emotion at all. Prime Coordinator Veltar of the Zephyrians materialized in the center of the chamber. His crystalline body caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once through translation systems built into the chamber itself. Lisa stepped forward and began the greeting she had practiced 1,000 times. She spoke about humanity's hopes for joining the galactic community and their desire to contribute to the greater good of all intelligent life. Her words were careful and respectful, as Earth's diplomats had taught her. Veltar listened without moving. When Lisa finished, he was quiet for long moments. Then he began to speak, and Jake felt his heart sink with every word. The council had not invited humanity to join as equals. Earth would be accepted only as a probationary species. Humans would serve the Council in whatever capacity was needed. They would maintain the older machines that more advanced species found beneath their notice. They would clean the stations and ships that kept galactic civilization running. They would do the manual labor that intelligent beings had evolved. Beyond needing to do themselves, the insults came next, and they cut deeper than any physical weapon could have. A delegate from the Korath hive mind announced that human art was nothing more than primitive scratching on cave walls. The Nethic collective representative declared that human music was random noise that hurt their energy patterns. Species after species stood to mock everything that made humanity unique. Human emotions were called evolutionary, mistakes that proper intelligent life had long since eliminated. The concept of individual identity was dismissed as a childish phase that advanced beings grew out of. Human literature was laughed at as the confused babbling of minds too simple to understand real meaning. Even human science was called a crude copying of discoveries that others had made. Millions of years earlier, Veltar returned to the center of the chamber and delivered the final blow. Humanity's greatest weakness was their inability to think as one unified mind. Their creativity and unpredictability were flaws that made them unsuitable for important work. The Council would graciously allow Earth to exist as a servant species because even flawed beings could push buttons and carry heavy objects. The chamber fell silent as the aliens waited for humanity's response. Jake could see other species delegates watching with expressions that might have been amusement. They had all heard these speeches before when their own species had been evaluated, and found wanting. Lisa stood perfectly still for 30 seconds that felt like hours. Her training had prepared her for rejection, but not for this level of calculated humiliation. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and professional. She thanked the Council for their generous offer and explained that such an important decision would need to be discussed with Earth's leadership. The human delegation would need time to consider all aspects of the proposal before giving their final answer. The aliens found this response hilarious. Laughter filled the chamber in dozens of different sounds. Some species made musical tones, while others created vibrations that humans felt in their bones. Veltar's crystalline body actually glowed brighter with what could only be amusement. Of course, the humans would need time to think. Their primitive minds couldn't process complex decisions quickly. The Council would graciously wait for Earth's inevitable acceptance. After all, what choice did humanity really have? They could serve the Council or remain forever isolated on their single small world while the galaxy moved on without them. The meeting ended with formal dismissal protocols. The human delegation was escorted back to their ship through the same impossible corridors. None of them spoke until the airlock sealed and the new horizons was clear of the station's docking arms. Jake set course for Earth, while Lisa sat in her quarters, staring at the formal offer documents. The journey home would take 3 years, during which humanity would have to decide whether to accept servitude or face eternal isolation. The Council was certain they knew which choice humans would make. They were wrong. The news reached Earth 6 months before the New Horizons arrived home. Quantum communication arrays had carried Ambassador Lisa Carter's preliminary report across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. By the time Captain Jake Morrison docked at Luna Station, every human on Earth knew about the Council's offer. President Helen Davis expected riots in the streets. She prepared emergency broadcasts to calm public anger and military units to maintain order. The Global Unity Parliament called emergency sessions while world leaders debated how to respond to such an insulting proposal. None of them were prepared for what actually happened. Humanity became quiet. Not the silence of defeat, but the focused calm of people who had made a decision. Street protests never materialized. Instead, citizens gathered in small groups to talk in low voices. Scientists met with artists who spoke to engineers who consulted with teachers. The conversations spread like ripples across every continent, but they were not conversations of rage or despair. Dr. Samuel Wright stood before the closed session of the Global Unity Parliament in Geneva 3 weeks after the news broke. The xenobiologist had spent his entire career studying the alien species that humanity had encountered over the centuries. His presentation began with a simple question that changed everything. When was the last time any council species had created something new? Not an improvement on existing technology, but something completely original. The answer was disturbing. The Zephyrians had not produced new art in over 2,000 years. Their crystal sculptures were identical to pieces found in ruins from their ancient past. The Korath hive mind had been thinking the same thoughts for millennia, with no variation or growth. The Nethic collective simply recycled the same energy, patterns endlessly like a broken recording. Every council species showed the same pattern. They had reached a level of technological advancement and then stopped. Their societies were perfect examples of stagnation dressed up as sophistication. They had gained immortality and lost the ability to dream. They had achieved unity by eliminating everything that made individuals unique. The Parliament listened in growing amazement as Dr. Wright revealed more disturbing facts. Council species lived for thousands of years, but none of them wrote new stories. They could travel faster than light, but they never explored just for the joy of discovery. They had eliminated war by removing all passion and creativity from their minds. They were not advanced civilizations, but the empty shells of what civilizations could become. In laboratories around the world, other scientists were making their own discoveries. Dr. Rachel Stone led a team that had been analyzing every piece of alien technology humanity had encountered. The results were shocking. Most council technology was incredibly old and had not been updated in centuries. The aliens built the same ships and used the same tools their ancestors had created long ago. Human children were brought in to look at the alien designs as part of a psychological study. 10-year-old kids immediately began suggesting improvements. That seemed obvious once pointed out. Why did the alien engines waste so much energy when a simple modification could make them twice as efficient? Why were their computers so slow when changing the processing sequence would speed them up dramatically? The alien technology was not advanced. It was ancient and stagnant. Humanity had been comparing their 100-year-old space program to civilizations that had been building the same outdated machines for millennia. The Council had not invited Earth to serve because humans were primitive. They had done it because they were afraid of what humans might become. President Davis authorized Project Exodus in secret. The name was chosen carefully. This was not about running away from the Council, but about walking towards something better. Dr. Stone was placed in charge of technological development, while General Peter Hayes handled military planning. Captain Morrison would lead the space fleet when the time came. The project had 3 main goals. First, humanity needed better ships. Not just faster or stronger, but completely independent vessels that could support human colonies without any outside help. Second, they needed to find worlds where humans could thrive without Council interference. Third, they needed to be ready to leave quietly, without giving the aliens time to stop them. Engineers, like Tony Martinez, began working 20-hour days designing revolutionary spacecraft. They took basic alien physics and applied human creativity to solve problems the Council had ignored for centuries. The improvements were dramatic. Human ships would be faster, more efficient, and more versatile than anything in Council space. The most important discoveries came from unexpected places. Emma Thompson was a child psychologist who had been studying how human children learned. She began testing kids with alien technology just to see how they would react. The results were beyond anything anyone had hoped for. 8-year-old children could look at alien machines and immediately understand how they worked. More importantly, they could see ways to make them work better. Teenagers began building improved versions of council technology, using nothing but scrap materials and imagination. What the aliens called perfection, humans called a rough first draft. Secrets spread through humanity's greatest minds. Artists began creating works that incorporated alien techniques with human emotion. Musicians composed pieces that used council mathematics to express feelings the aliens had forgotten how to feel. Writers told stories about civilizations that grew and changed instead of becoming frozen in perfect lifeless order. Maya Johnson returned to Earth with detailed intelligence about council communication networks. She had memorized frequency patterns, shipping schedules, and security protocols during her time on the station. More importantly, she had noticed something the aliens missed. Their networks carried information about hundreds of species that had been rejected by the Council over the centuries. These rejected species were scattered across the galaxy, living in isolation like humanity had been. The Council dismissed them as too chaotic, too emotional, or too unpredictable to join their perfect order. Many of them possessed incredible abilities that Council species had lost long ago. The artistic melodians could shape matter with their music. The warrior poets of Valzak had developed philosophy and combat into a single discipline. The seekers of truth had spent millennia asking questions that the Council considered meaningless. Humanity began reaching out to these forgotten peoples through carefully hidden messages. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species after species replied with excitement at the possibility of joining something new. They had been waiting for centuries for someone to offer them partnership instead of servitude. The Exodus fleet began taking shape in asteroid fields and gas giant atmospheres where Council sensors could not detect them. Each ship was a masterpiece of human engineering combined with alien science. They looked crude from the outside, but inside they contained technology that would have amazed the Council if they had been capable of amazement. Dr. Wright established contact with rebel factions. Within Council space, young members of various species who still retained enough individuality to question their leaders. They provided intelligence about Council movements and warned of potential threats. Some even volunteered to help with the Exodus when the time came. President Davis signed the final authorization for Project Exodus on a cold morning in December. A decision had been made, not in anger, but in hope. Humanity would accept the Council's offer, but only as a cover for their real plan. They would pretend to serve while they prepared to leave. When the time was right, they would walk away from those who mocked them and build something worthy of the stars. The Council was expecting humanity's answer soon. They would get it, but not the one they were expecting. Earth had chosen dignity over servitude and freedom over safety. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided to write their own future. 6 months after the humiliating meeting, Ambassador Lisa Carter stood once again in the Council chambers. This time she was not alone. Behind her walked 200 carefully chosen humans who the Council believed were simple workers and servants. Captain Jake Morrison carried maintenance tools that hid advanced scanning equipment. Dr. Alex Rodriguez wore the uniform of a janitor, while his mind cataloged every piece of alien technology he saw. The acceptance ceremony was brief and cold. Prime Coordinator Veltar announced that Earth had made the wise choice to serve the galactic community. Human workers would be distributed across Council space to maintain the infrastructure that kept their perfect civilization running. They would be grateful for this opportunity to contribute something useful to the galaxy. Lisa signed the documents with a steady hand. Each page bound humanity to serve the Council for a minimum of 50 years with the possibility of earning full membership after proving their worth. The terms were designed to be insulting, but she read every word carefully. The Council had given humanity exactly what they needed: access to their technology and freedom to move throughout their territory. Jake found himself assigned to the engine room of a massive Korath dreadnought called the Unity of Purpose. The ship was over 3 kilometers long and housed 50,000 members of the hive mind. His job was to maintain the ancient fusion reactors that powered the vessel. The Korath considered this work beneath the attention of their collective intelligence. The first day on the job, Jake discovered something that made him smile despite the circumstances. The fusion reactors were identical to designs that humanity had abandoned 2 centuries earlier. They were inefficient, noisy, and required constant maintenance because their builders had never bothered to improve them. Jake could have redesigned the entire system in his sleep, but instead he began documenting everything. Every maintenance panel he opened revealed technology that was centuries out of date. The Korath had been building the same ships for over 1,000 years without changing a single component. They called it perfection, but Jake recognized it as the stagnation that Dr. Samuel Wright had warned about. These aliens had stopped growing so long ago that they no longer remembered how to improve anything. While Jake worked in the engine rooms, Dr. Rodriguez found himself scrubbing floors in a Zephyrian research facility on the desert world of Karima. The crystalline beings who ran the facility barely acknowledged his existence as he moved between laboratories with his cleaning supplies. They were so convinced of their superiority that they discussed their most secret projects openly in front of him. The research being conducted would have excited human scientists beyond measure. The Zephyrians were experimenting with dimensional physics and energy manipulation that could revolutionize space travel. But Alex could see immediately that their approach was fundamentally flawed. They were trying to force reality to conform to their rigid mathematics, instead of working with the natural flexibility of space and time. During his 3rd week at the facility, Alex overheard a conversation that changed everything. The lead researcher was complaining about problems they had been trying to solve for over 200 years. The equations worked perfectly in theory, but failed every time they tried to build a working prototype. Alex recognized the problem instantly. They were missing a simple variable that any human graduate student would have spotted. Maya Johnson had been assigned to the Council's Central Communication Hub on Nexus Prime. Her official job was to replace worn-out components in the massive computer systems that coordinated messages across the galaxy. In reality, she was learning more about Council operations than any human had ever known. The aliens trusted her so little that they never bothered to encrypt their communications in her presence. She discovered that the Council was far more fragile than they pretended. Dozens of member species were experiencing internal problems that their leaders refused to acknowledge. Young Korath were beginning to think individual thoughts that confused the hive mind. Zephyrian crystals were developing flaws that created unexpected emotional responses. Even the gaseous Nethik were showing signs of instability. As some members began to separate from the collective, the most shocking discovery came when Maya accessed historical records that the Council thought were too boring for a human to understand. She learned that over the past 1,000 years, more than 300 species had joined the Council as servants like humanity. Not one of them had ever been promoted to full membership. Most had simply vanished from the records after a few decades, with no explanation of what had happened to them. Back on Earth, the hidden revolution was accelerating beyond anyone's wildest hopes. Dr. Rachel Stone's laboratories had produced the first prototype of what they called a quantum leap drive. It used principles stolen from Zephyrian research, but applied with human creativity to achieve results the aliens had never imagined. Test. Flight showed the new drive was 4 times faster than the best Council technology. Breakthrough that changed everything came from 12-year-old Kenny Lopez, who lived in a small town in California. Dr. Stone had been sending alien technology blueprints to schools around the world as part of an educational program. Kenny was supposed to write a report about how the technology worked, but instead he submitted a drawing showing how it could work better. The modification Kenny suggested was so simple that Dr. Stone almost dismissed it as a child's mistake. Something made her test the idea in her laboratory. When she activated the modified device, it worked exactly as Kenny had predicted. The improvement increased efficiency by 400%, while reducing the energy requirements to almost nothing. Dr. Stone immediately contacted Dr. Emma Thompson, who had been studying how human children processed alien concepts. Together, they established the Youth Innovation Program that sent alien technology problems to schools around the world. The results were remarkable. Children between 8 and 15 years old consistently produced solutions that had eluded alien scientists for centuries. The reason was simple but profound. Human children had not yet learned that certain things were impossible. Their minds were flexible enough to see connections that adult logic rejected. More importantly, they approached problems with curiosity and wonder instead of the rigid perfectionism that had trapped the council species. Tony Martinez led the engineering teams that were building humanity's Exodus fleet. Each ship incorporated improvements suggested by everyone from Nobel Prize winners to elementary school students. The vessels looked primitive from the outside because human engineers had learned to hide their advanced capabilities behind crude exteriors. Council sensors would see exactly what they expected: rough human construction that posed no threat to their superiority. General Peter Hayes coordinated the military aspects of the operation. His job was not to prepare for war, but to ensure that humanity could defend their new colonies if necessary. Human weapons technology had also benefited from studying alien designs. The improvements were so dramatic that Hayes sometimes wondered if the Council had deliberately given humanity obsolete examples to study. Dr. Wright established contact with rejected species throughout the galaxy. The response was overwhelming, as dozens of civilizations expressed interest in joining humanity's exodus. The Melodians sent beautiful songs that contained detailed star charts. The Valzakian warrior poets composed epics that described safe routes through dangerous space. The Seekers of Truth shared philosophical treatises that were actually encoded technical manuals. President Helen Davis received weekly reports that filled her with growing confidence. Project Exodus was ahead of schedule and exceeding all expectations. More importantly, the Council remained completely unaware of what was happening. Their arrogance had blinded them to the possibility that their servants might be planning something beyond their comprehension. The first Exodus ships were completed and hidden in the gas-giant atmospheres of the outer solar system. Each vessel could support 10,000 people for decades without outside assistance. They carried genetic samples from Earth's biosphere cultural archives, from human civilization and manufacturing, equipment that could build anything needed for colonial life. Lisa received her final instructions through encrypted quantum communications. The deception would continue for another 6 months, while the last preparations were completed. Then humanity would begin the largest migration in the history of the galaxy. They would not run away in fear, but walk away with dignity toward a future they would build with their own hands. The Council thought they had tamed humanity and made them useful servants. They had no idea that they had given their greatest potential rivals access to everything they needed to surpass them. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humans decided to stop playing by other people's rules. 2 years and 3 months after accepting the Council's terms, the Great Exodus began. It started small and quiet, like the first drops of rain before a storm. Emma Thompson stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Dawn as it slipped away from Earth's hidden shipyards. Behind her sat 3,000 families who had volunteered to be the first pioneers in humanity's greatest adventure. The ship used the improved quantum leap drives that made it 4 times faster than anything in the Council fleet. What should have been a 6-month journey to the target system would take only 6 weeks. The destination was a world that human scouts had designated New Haven, located in a star system beyond the edge of Council space where no alien patrol had ever traveled. Watched Earth shrink behind them as the ship accelerated toward the edge of the solar system. Most of the families on board thought they were part of a scientific expedition to establish humanity's first independent colony. Only a few knew that this was actually the beginning of the largest migration in galactic history. Captain Jake Morrison was still playing his role as a maintenance worker on the Korath Dreadnought Unity of Purpose when he received the coded signal. Phase 2 of the Exodus was beginning, and it was time for him to coordinate the departure of Earth's military families and defense personnel. His 2 years of studying Korath technology had given him everything he needed to know about their capabilities and weaknesses. The hive mind species was even more predictable than human analysts had expected. They followed the same patrol routes on the same schedules, using the same communication protocols they had used for centuries. Jake had memorized their entire operational structure simply by listening to routine status reports. During his maintenance shifts, he activated a hidden transmitter that sent coordinates to the waiting human fleet. Within hours, transport ships began arriving at predetermined locations throughout Council space. They used stealth technology that combined human innovation with stolen alien physics to become invisible to Council sensors. The ships looked like space debris or natural phenomena to any scanner that detected them. Maya Johnson had spent 2 years learning everything about the Council's communication networks. Her position in the central hub on Nexus Prime had given her access to shipping schedules, patrol routes, and the personal communication codes of every Council official. More importantly, she had discovered something that would change the course of galactic history. The Council's treatment of servant species was worse than anyone had imagined. Maya found records of over 300 civilizations that had been accepted as servants over the past millennium. Most had simply vanished from the databases after a few decades. The few records that remained suggested these species had been quietly eliminated when they were no longer useful or when they began showing signs of independence. Maya's most important mission was to contact the rejected species that Dr. Samuel Wright had identified. She used the Council's own communication system to send coded messages to dozens of civilizations that had been dismissed as too chaotic or unpredictable to join the galactic order. The message was simple but revolutionary. Earth was leaving, and they were welcome to come along. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The artistic Melodians replied with songs that contained star charts and rendezvous coordinates. The warrior poets of Vulzuk sent epic verses that were actually tactical plans for coordinated departures. The philosophical seekers of truth transmitted mathematical proofs that encoded technical specifications for improved faster-than-light drives. Within weeks, representatives from 47 different rejected species had confirmed their intention to join the human exodus. Many of them had capabilities that would complement human strengths perfectly. The Melodians could literally sing matter into new shapes. The Valzakians had developed combat techniques that treated warfare as a form of artistic expression. The Seekers had spent millennia asking questions that led to scientific breakthroughs the Council considered impossible. Dr. Alex Rodriguez had become an expert on Zephyrian dimensional physics during his time scrubbing floors in their research facility. The crystalline aliens had been working on the same theoretical problems for over 2 centuries without making any real progress. Alex had identified dozens of simple modifications that would make their experiments actually work, but he kept his knowledge secret. Instead, he began sabotaging their research in subtle ways. A miscalibrated instrument here and a slightly altered equation there created failures that the Zephyrians blamed on their equipment. They never suspected that their human janitor understood their work better than they did. Alex was buying time for the exodus while gathering intelligence that would help humanity develop even more advanced technology. The evacuation of Earth proceeded in carefully planned stages. Entire cities were quietly emptied as their populations were transported to hidden staging areas in the outer solar system. The operation was so smooth that most people didn't realize they were part of a massive migration until they found themselves aboard colonial transports heading for the stars. President Helen Davis coordinated the largest logistical operation in human history from a command center hidden beneath the Swiss Alps. Real-time reports arrived from human operatives throughout council space, while transport ships moved millions of people with clockwork precision. The council's own patrol schedules and communication protocols had been turned against them to facilitate humanity's departure. Dr. Rachel Stone led the final scientific teams off Earth, carrying genetic samples from every species on the planet and complete backups of human civilization's accumulated knowledge. Her laboratories had produced technology that surpassed council capabilities in every meaningful way. The quantum leap drives were just the beginning. Human scientists had developed healing techniques that worked with biological systems instead of replacing them, and terraforming technology that enhanced planetary ecosystems instead of destroying them. The most remarkable innovations came from the HFY collaboration between human children and rejected alien species. Young humans working with melodian artists had created music that could literally reshape matter at the molecular level. Teenagers partnering with seeker philosophers had developed new mathematical frameworks that made faster than light travel as easy as walking across a room. Tony Martinez supervised the launch of the main fleet from hidden bases in the asteroid belt. 300 ships carrying 10 million humans began their journey toward rendezvous points where they would meet with vessels from the rejected species. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering that combined the best ideas from dozens of different civilizations, guided by human creativity and determination. General Peter Hayes established secure communication links between all the human groups scattered across council space. His military background had taught him the importance of coordination, but this operation required subtlety rather than force. Every human in council territory had to disappear at exactly the right moment to avoid giving the aliens time to react. The council remained completely oblivious to what was happening around them. Their arrogance had blinded them to the possibility that servant species might be capable of independent action. When minor equipment failures began occurring throughout their territory, they blamed human incompetence rather than recognizing signs of deliberate sabotage. Veltar, the Zephyrian Prime coordinator, actually issued a statement praising the effectiveness of human workers. Their maintenance had improved efficiency in some systems, even as others experienced mysterious problems. He recommended expanding the servant program to include more primitive species that could provide useful manual labor. The evacuation reached its final phase when Ambassador Lisa Carter recorded her farewell message from the bridge of the flagship Freedom. The massive vessel had been built in secret using revolutionary construction techniques that allowed it to be assembled in just 6 months. It carried the symbols of human civilization and the hopes of every species that had chosen freedom over servitude. Lisa's message would be transmitted to the Council with a time delay. That would give the human fleet a significant head start. In it, she thanked the aliens for showing humanity what they never wanted to become. She explained that humans had chosen dignity over safety and independence over the security of serving others. The message ended with a simple word that would echo through galactic history. Goodbye. The greatest migration in the history of the galaxy was complete. Humanity had walked away from those who mocked them and taken dozens of other species along on the journey. The Council had offered servitude, but humanity had chosen something infinitely more valuable. They had chosen to write their own future among the stars. 5 years after the Great Exodus, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of New Haven Station and watched ships from a dozen different species dock at the massive orbital platform. The station itself was a work of art that combined human engineering with Melodian crystal-growing techniques and Valzakian architectural philosophy. It represented everything the Council had said was impossible about cooperation between different civilizations. The planet below was a testament to what could be achieved when species worked together instead of trying to dominate each other. New Haven's continents held human cities that grew alongside Melodian crystal gardens, where music shaped living sculptures that changed with the seasons. Valzakian warrior temples sat next to seeker meditation centers where philosophers from multiple species debated questions that had no easy answers. Children played in parks where young humans learned telepathic games from seeker juveniles, while Melodian youngsters taught them how to sing flowers into bloom. The sight never failed to amaze Jake, even after 5 years of watching these impossible friendships develop. The Council had been wrong about everything, but especially about the value of diversity and individual thought. The Human Alliance Federation now controlled over 200 star systems in the Outer Rim territories. Each world was unique, reflecting the needs and dreams of its inhabitants. Some planets focused on scientific research, while others became centers of art and culture. Mining worlds used revolutionary extraction techniques that left ecosystems intact, while agricultural colonies produced food that fed dozens of species with different biological needs. Diana Thompson had become the Federation's Minister of Education, overseeing schools that would have been unimaginable under Council rule. Human children learned mathematics from seeker philosophers, while Melodian youth studied human literature. That taught them about individual identity and personal growth. The exchange of ideas was producing innovations at a rate that astounded everyone involved. The most remarkable students were the mixed groups of young people from different species who had grown up together on Federation worlds. 10-year-old Lucy Chun could communicate telepathically with seeker philosophers while maintaining her human individuality. Teenage Jake Williams collaborated with Melodian artists to create music that could literally reshape matter while expressing emotions that brought tears to alien eyes. These hybrid cultures were producing technology that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships that could travel between galaxies in weeks instead of centuries. Healing devices that could regrow lost limbs and repair genetic damage. Terraforming systems that could turn dead worlds into gardens in just a few years. Most importantly, they had developed these innovations through cooperation rather than conquest. Meanwhile, in Council space, the Galactic Harmony Council faced the worst crisis in their recorded history. The disappearance of humanity had triggered a cascade of problems that their perfect civilization was not equipped to handle. Without human maintenance workers, their ancient machines were breaking down faster than they could be repaired. Critical systems were failing throughout their territory, as equipment that had run flawlessly for centuries suddenly refused to function. Veltar, the Zephyrian Prime Coordinator, stood in the council chambers that now felt cold and empty. Nearly a quarter of the member species had experienced significant internal problems since the humans left. Young Korath were developing individual personalities that disrupted the hive mind's unity. Zephyrian crystals were forming emotional resonances that their kind had not felt for millennia. Even the gaseous Nethic were showing signs of instability, as individual members began questioning the collective's decisions. The worst part was the questions. For the first time in centuries, council species were asking why things had to be done certain ways. They wanted to know why new ideas were forbidden, and why innovation was considered dangerous. Young aliens who had never expressed curiosity before were demanding explanations that their elders could not provide. Dr. Alex Rodriguez had established the Federation Institute of Sciences on a world that orbited twin stars casting rainbow light across crystal cities. The research being conducted that would have been impossible under Council rule because it required the kind of creative thinking that the aliens had abandoned long ago. Federation scientists were not just discovering new things, but asking entirely new kinds of questions. The breakthrough that changed everything came when human researchers working with seeker philosophers discovered the fundamental flaw in Council civilization. The alien species had not evolved beyond emotion and individuality. They had surgically removed these qualities from their minds through genetic engineering and psychological conditioning that had been refined over thousands of years. The Council had sacrificed everything that made life worth living in exchange for perfect order and technological stagnation. They were not advanced beings, but the hollow shells of what they could have been. Their perfection was actually a form of spiritual death that they had mistaken for enlightenment. Maya Johnson now served as the Federation's Minister of Communications, coordinating with rejected species throughout the galaxy. Her network had grown to include over 300 civilizations that had been dismissed by the Council as too chaotic or unpredictable. Many of these species possessed abilities that made Council technology look primitive by comparison. The Federation was not just growing, but accelerating. Each new member species brought unique capabilities that enhanced everyone else's potential. Trade routes connected worlds where artists from one species inspired scientists from another to make discoveries that neither could have achieved alone. The diversity that the Council feared had become humanity's greatest strength. Captain Morrison, who was now Admiral Morrison, commanded a fleet that represented the perfect fusion of multiple species innovations, guided by human creativity and determination. Federation ships were not just faster and stronger than Council vessels, but more beautiful and more alive. They were works of art that could cross the galaxy, while their crews lived in comfort that surpassed anything the Council could offer. The Federation had also attracted the attention of ancient species that had withdrawn from galactic affairs long before the Council was formed. These elder races had been watching the galaxy's development with growing disappointment until humanity's exodus gave them hope that younger species might still be capable of growth and wisdom. Ambassador Lisa Carter, who was now Foreign Minister Carter, received a message that would have shocked the Council if they had known about it. The architects who had built the great monuments found on dead worlds throughout the galaxy wanted to meet with Federation representatives. These legendary beings had vanished millions of years ago, but they had been monitoring galactic civilization, waiting for someone worthy of their knowledge. The meeting took place on a world at the edge of the galaxy, where structures older than most star systems reached toward alien skies. The architects were beings of pure thought who had transcended physical form without losing their curiosity and wonder. They had been waiting for a civilization that valued growth over stagnation and cooperation over domination. They offered the Federation access to technologies that could reshape reality itself, but only if humanity and their allies promised never to become like the Council. The knowledge came with responsibility to use it wisely and to help other species grow rather than controlling them. Back in Council, Space Veltar received reports that filled him with emotions. He thought his species had evolved beyond fear, uncertainty, and something that might have been regret. The Federation was not just surviving, but thriving in ways that made Council civilization look primitive and lifeless. Their technology was advancing at impossible speeds, while their art and culture flourished like gardens after rain. The final message arrived on quantum frequencies that the Council had not used in centuries. It came from Foreign Minister Carter, standing in her office, overlooking New Haven's diverse cityscape, where children from a dozen species played together, while their parents worked on projects that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The Council wanted to discuss terms for humanity's return as equals. They offered full membership and access to all Council technology in exchange for sharing Federation innovations. They promised to treat humans with respect and to value their contributions to galactic civilization. Carter read the message while watching young humans and aliens work together on art projects that would have been impossible for any single species to create. Through her window, she could see the launch of another exploration fleet heading toward unexplored regions of space where new wonders waited to be discovered. Her response was brief and final. The galaxy was large enough for everyone to find their own path. The Federation wished the Council well on their journey, but humanity had chosen a different road. They had found something more valuable than membership in an ancient order. They had found the freedom to grow and dream and become something new. The Council had mocked Earth and offered servitude. Humanity had chosen dignity and independence. In the end, the best revenge was not conquest or destruction, but building something better and proving that those who dismiss others' potential do so at their own cost.